He destroyed the Empire's most feared warrior and claimed them all as his concubines. A bluish mist danced across the ruins of what was once Denver. The sky, once pure, now bore scars of smoke and fire. Cracked concrete towers rose like the bones of a dead giant, and silent patrol drones glided overhead. Earth had been conquered, and humanity reduced to legend in its own homeland. Atop a floating palace anchored above the Grand Canyon, she stood watching the horizon. Kalia, heir to the Theranii dynasty, feared no one. Her sapphire skin shimmered under the alien city lights suspended in the skies, and her long white hair, braided with living crystals, flowed as if alive. In the records of the conquered worlds, Kalia was known as the Queen of Subjugation. It was a title she accepted with a silent smile. But today, something felt wrong. Her piercing violet eyes were locked on the monitors. On the field below, live feeds streamed yet another human uprising. Rebels. Insignificant, or so they said. They sent just one, Kalia murmured, raising an eyebrow. Yes, your majesty, replied her advisor, a silver-skinned female named Serene. They say this human refused to wait for reinforcements. He said he didn't need them. Kalia frowned. Arrogance. Foolish and fascinating. In the center of the massive spherical arena, Kalia's champion stood waiting, a 12-foot colossus clad in living armor, the terror of galaxies. The executioner who had annihilated civilizations without taking a single scratch. And from the other side, stepping through dust and war debris, he appeared. The human, Eli Navarro, according to the records. Former Special Operations Commander, survivor of the New Phoenix Massacre. Now, the latest name in a long list of dead rebels. But Kalia froze when she saw him. It wasn't just his upright stance or the way muscles rippled beneath his makeshift combat suit. It was the calm in his brown eyes, not like a man ready to fight, but to destroy, as if the world had already died for him, except for one thing or one person inside that palace. She leaned back slowly into her floating throne. For the first time in years, a strange chill traced down her spine. What kind of man walks alone to his end with the eyes of someone who's already won? She whispered. Serene didn't answer. The other concubines, for ethereal figures of different races, also fell silent. They felt it too. The silence shattered as the champion roared, descending into the arena, his armor plates thundering like war drums. The ground shook. Eli didn't even flinch. The battle began, but it wasn't a show. It wasn't elegant. The human didn't fight with technique. He fought with fury. Cold, raw, inhuman fury. In seconds, he was on top of the champion. 5 more, and he had pierced the living armor with a weapon made from fused scrap and plasma blades. In under a minute, the champion lay cleaved in half. Silence. Total. Kalia rose from her throne. The concubines instinctively dropped to their knees, as if the violence of that moment had shifted the axis of the universe. Even Serene trembled. Down below, through the mist of alien blood, Eli raised his face and looked straight into the throne's live feed camera. He looked at her. There was no pleading in his gaze. No defiance either. It was possession. Kalia's heart pounded, harder than it had since her first war. She turned away, trying to hide the flush rising beneath her blue skin. But it was too late. Her handmaidens already knew, and so did she. Destiny had shifted in that instant. The obsidian corridors of the floating palace felt more silent that night. Kalia walked slowly, barefoot across floors that pulsed faintly with the energy of the imperial vessel. The champion's defeat had shaken more than the throne. It had shaken the Empire's faith. Eli was imprisoned, or so they thought. 3 of Kalia's 4 concubines had spent the day in deep purification rituals, trying to divine the spiritual meaning of what they'd witnessed. The 4th, Neri, the youngest, whispered a question into the night. Will Kalia now be given to the human, as decreed by the ancient law of galactic submission? He who defeats the champion wins the heart of the court, said the sacred text of the Theranii. But Kalia refused to accept that. Even with the echo of that image still burning behind her eyes, the human, blood-stained, staring at her with a primitive, almost cruel authority. She stopped in front of the cell where he was being held. The guards let her in without a word. Inside, Eli was seated with his back against the wall of darkened crystal. He was clean. Either he'd found water, or someone had cleaned him. His dark hair was tied back, and he looked at her exactly as he had before, like she was just one more thing waiting to be taken. "Did you come to thank me?" he asked. His voice was low, rough from battle, but steady. Kalia crossed her arms. She wasn't wearing her ceremonial armor now, just a light robe woven with living threads, glowing faintly to the rhythm of her pulse. "I came to understand what you are," she answered slowly. He smiled, not mockingly, more like someone allowing himself the brief luxury of irony. "A human, the same kind you buried alive for decades. The same kind your forces tried to incinerate in New Phoenix." The name of that city still burned like a scar across Earth's map. Kalia kept her face neutral. "You weren't supposed to survive, let alone get near the champion." He underestimated what it means to have nothing left to lose. The words hung in the air like poison. Or truth. Kalia stepped closer. The containment field around him adjusted to her presence. Now only a few feet separated them. "You challenged us with a move that will shift the balance of galaxies," she said. "Tell me what you want, Eli Navarro." He looked up. For the first time, he didn't seem cold, just real. "I want you." Kalia froze, not because of the boldness, but because of the raw sincerity in his voice. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't pretending. "For what?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "Because while I was killing that monster, you saw me. Not as a prisoner, not as a beast. You saw me." He tilted his head slightly. "And that scared you more than your champion's death, didn't it?" She stepped back, barely noticing it herself. He didn't move. His eyes never left hers. "You and your concubines already belong to me by the rules of your own culture. But I didn't come here for conquest. I came for redemption. I just didn't expect to find you." Kalia turned sharply and left, the door sealing shut behind her. But her chest was burning. And what disturbed her most wasn't what he'd said. It was the fact that, deep down, she believed it. Meanwhile, elsewhere aboard the palace ship, counselors gathered in holographic circles. The Empire's senators were in a state of alarm. The champion had fallen. An ancient law demanded that Kalia perform a sacred rite to offer herself, along with her handmaidens, to the victor of the arena. But Kalia was born of a warrior bloodline. To submit to a human? Unthinkable. Unless he dies before the blood moon, Serene said flatly to the Elder Council via hollow projection. There are precedents. Possession is not sealed if the creature does not survive the first full moon. They all exchanged looks. A plan was forming. That night, Kalia lay in her meditation chamber. But she didn't dream. Because somewhere in the palace shadows, someone was already planning to kill Eli Navarro before the blood moon rose in the sky. And she didn't know what she wanted anymore. In the palace's silent chamber, the blood moon hovered over the American sky like a prophecy. Its red glow bathed the ashen fields below, and the air felt frozen in time. For the people of Istharani Empire, this moon marked the end of a power cycle and the beginning of ritual submission. But tonight, there would be no ceremony. Not unless Eli Navarro lived to see the sunrise. He was asleep. For the first time in days, his exhausted body had allowed itself a moment of unconsciousness. The cell no longer held him. After his victory over the champion, his confinement was more political than physical. He now had access to the lower temple, the tower garden, and the transition chamber. But in the dark hours before dawn, the palace corridors were shadowed and still. A figure moved with precision, long limbs, reflective armor, a ceremonial blade in each hand, both pulsing with neural poison. A crown executor, a sacred assassin, summoned only when the royal bloodline itself was at risk. Eli woke the moment the vibration of the floor changed. Old training, soldier's instinct. He had no time to grab anything but the light pants he was wearing. He rolled to the side, just as the first blade slashed through the air where his throat had been. The enemy's impact against the floor triggered the silent alarm. Doors began to seal, but Eli didn't wait. He fought like someone who wasn't fighting to live, but for something greater. The battle was brutal. Their bodies crashed into pillars of light, shattered sensitive sculptures, and tore through the translucent walls of the Oracle Hall. The executor was faster, but Eli was unpredictable. In the second-to-last clash, the alien's blade drove through Eli's shoulder. He screamed, not in pain, but in frustration, because he knew he couldn't fall, not for himself, but for her, Kalia. And then, he did the unthinkable. Using the blade still lodged in his shoulder, he twisted his body with savage force and drove the handle of his own makeshift weapon, a spike torn from the altar, straight into the executor's neck. The sound was wet, final, absolute. Silence. Eli dropped to his knees. Blood ran in slow threads down his arm, his breathing ragged. But he was alive. Again, the doors burst open. Guards rushed in, and behind them her, Kalia. The moment she saw him, kneeling, wounded, blood dripping onto the psychic marble of the ancestral hall, something inside her cracked. She crossed the energy field, dropped her knees, touched the warm, torn skin of a human. "You should be dead. I try to follow the rules," he muttered, breathless. "But I guess your people underestimate human stubbornness." She smiled, despite herself. A faint laugh, almost tragic. "Who did this?" she asked, turning to the guards behind her. "Who gave the order?" They hesitated. One of them dropped to his knees. The ancestral chamber. Serene submitted the motion. It passed with approval from 3 clans. Kalia stood slowly. Her eyes held no warmth now, only judgment. Use the same blades prepared for Eli. Start with Serene. The silence was deadly, but the orders would be obeyed. That night, Kalia didn't return to her chambers. Instead, she stayed in the crystal infirmary with Eli. She watched as the biosutures sealed his wound. She watched as he slept, his brow furrowed like he was still fighting battles in his dreams. She hated him, hated what he did to her, hated that he made her break tradition, that he made her hesitate, feel. But also, she admired him, and that was unforgivable. Hours later, he woke, turning his face to find her sitting there. No armor, no crown, no shield. "You still plan to claim me as your concubine?" she asked, without warning. He blinked, then turned fully toward her, propping himself up on his injured arm. "No." She hadn't expected that. "No, I don't want concubines. I don't want slaves. I want you free, choosing me, or not." Kalia felt her eyes burn, a strange sensation, unfamiliar. "And if I don't choose, then I walk away, with scars but alive." Silence, heavy, endless. She leaned in, until their foreheads were almost touching. "You're insane," she whispered, "and you're an empress afraid of herself." They stared at each other, long wordless, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. The palace ship hovered over the Nevada desert like an open wound in the sky. Its gravity fields warped the space around it, clouds frozen mid-sway as they curled around the structure. Inside, the walls whispered, echoes of conspiracies, fears, and buried desires. But none of that mattered in that moment. Kalia stood before the Blood Assembly, the oldest council in the Empire. 21 ancient beings floated around her, their forms cloaked in golden mist. Their voices overlapped, hissing sharp. "You broke the chain of tradition," one of them said. "The Staranii bloodline has never bowed," said another. "He's a human. He is nothing." Kalia held her stance, but her heart pounded like a war drum. It wasn't for pride anymore, not for imperial glory. It was for him. "What I saw," she said, her voice steady, "was courage none of our own ever showed." Silence. "What I saw was humanity. And I don't just mean the species. I mean the essence." One of the elders floated forward. His eyes were burnt-out orbits, and his presence seemed to suck the air from the chamber. "Are you suggesting your soul belongs to this animal?" Kalia didn't hesitate. "My soul belongs to me, and I offer it only to one who sees it as more than a throne." Behind a sealed door, Eli listened. He hadn't been allowed inside, but that didn't stop him. The living halls of the palace echoed sound, and he heard every word like bullets hitting his chest. She was risking everything, to choose freedom, to choose sight instead of domination. Above the surface, chaos had already begun. Radical clans were attacking human colonies. Uprisings ignited on Mars and Juno's moon. The empire itself was cracking, and everyone wanted a head to offer the gods. Eli's, or Kalia's. Later, alone in her quarters, Kalia waited. The council's verdict would arrive at dawn. The door opened. Eli entered without a word. She looked at him like you look at something inevitable. Not with fear, but with the calm of someone facing a storm they no longer resist. They said, "I'm one of your concubines now," she said. He walked toward her, slow. "You're not mine, unless you choose to be." She rose, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. The tension between them was older than language itself. She reached out and touched his face. "Then listen to me, human. I'm listening. If we survive what's coming, you'll be remembered as the one who broke my champion, and you'll be remembered as the one who shattered her own crown." She smiled, for the first time without pain. "Or maybe we'll be remembered together." And then she kissed him, slow, endless, as if trying to erase all the wars with her mouth. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, for two worlds colliding and changing each other, hit subscribe. There's so much more waiting for you. The kiss was a point of no return. The next morning, the palace halls were colder, not from temperature, but atmosphere. Servants went quiet when they saw Kalia. Advisors averted their eyes. The concubines, once silent rivals for her attention, now bowed as if mourning a death. The assembly's verdict had arrived. Kalia was stripped of her station, not her bloodline, but the throne, for emotional entanglement with a lesser species, ritual breach, and endangerment of cultural heritage. She was allowed to live, but without guards, without protection, without title. Eli was with her when the decrees came. He read every word without reacting, while she stood tall, spine straight, as if still wearing her imperial armor. "They think this breaks me," she said, slowly sitting on the edge of the suspended window, gazing down at earth spinning below. "They don't understand the throne was never mine. I was just the reflection of their fear. And now?" Eli asked, stepping closer. "What are we?" She looked at him. Her blue skin shimmered under the soft planetary light. Her eyes, once imperial, now carried something far more human: vulnerability. "Now we're targets." That same afternoon, the transport frigate meant to take them to a diplomatic recovery post was ambushed by forces of the Vorax clan, a rival house that had never accepted the bond between Kalia and the human. It was the first time they fought side by side. She wielded a psychic spear made of living crystal, shaped by her own life force. He carried a handcrafted rifle with a plasma core and retractable ocular scope, a gift from an old warrior in New Phoenix. On the burning platform, surrounded by wreckage, they defended not just each other, but something neither of them could name anymore. Amidst the gunfire and screams, Kalia was grazed by a shot. Her blue blood hit the ground. Eli saw it, and roared with a fury she had never seen in him. "Eli!" she shouted, trying to stop him. But it was too late. He tore through enemy lines like a living storm. Unarmed, he used his fists, his boots, the battlefield itself. The last of the Vorax died with wide, terrified eyes. When Eli returned, he dropped to his knees beside her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice still burning with rage. Kalia touched his face. It was covered in blood, none of it his. "You should be afraid of me," she whispered. "I'm not that kind of human anymore." She understood. Right there, in the heat of broken engines, in the shadows of what remained of imperial politics, something had begun. Something stronger than any decree. Hours later, in a makeshift shelter among the ship's ruins, she lay down beside him. "They won't stop," she said, staring at the cracked ceiling. "The Empire will hunt us. Not out of revenge, out of fear." "So that's what we are now?" he asked. A reminder of what they fear most, or the beginning of something they can no longer control. Silence. Heavy. Warm. She turned, resting her head on his chest. "If I'd met you sooner, maybe I would have destroyed fewer worlds. And if I'd met you sooner, maybe I would have fought for more than just survival." She smiled. "You still can." And in that moment, between shards of tech and the wreckage of war, there was no princess, no soldier, just two souls, caught in the aftermath of love and choice. The sandstorm had battered the shipwreck since dawn. They'd found shelter in a cavern of ancient crystals, long forgotten by star charts, maybe because no empire ever expected to need a hiding place. There, beneath living stalactites that pulsed like stone hearts, Kalia cared for Eli. He slept, his shoulder bandaged, chest rising slowly. For the first time in days, his expression wasn't strained, just tired, human, mortal. She watched him in silence. For entire cycles, servants, counselors, and slaves had bowed to her will, yet never seen her. Eli was the only one who ever looked at her, as if she existed without the crown, without the war, without the blood. And that terrified her. She ran her fingers through his hair, a gesture that, in her world, would have been seen as betrayal or weakness. But now, there was no her world, only the two of them. When Eli awoke, Kalia was facing away, meditating before a blue flame. He didn't speak at first, just watched how her shoulders rose and fell with each measured breath, as if taming something older than pain. "You're hurt," he said eventually. She didn't turn around. "So are you. But if we focus on every wound, we'll never learn how to walk again." Eli sat up slowly, groaning. His shirt still bore the stains of dry blood. "I used to think about giving up. On everything," he said. "When I lost my squad. When I watched my city turn to smoke. I thought revenge was all I had left." She turned to him slowly, looked at him, not as an empress, but as a survivor. "Me too. When I took this system, I told myself I was bringing order. But really, I was just a child with too much power, trying to fill a void." They sat in silence for a while. "And now?" he asked. "Now, I think we have a chance not to repeat the same mistakes." She moved closer, then knelt in front of him. "Eli, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. Not out of honor, not out of pride, but because I've learned no one should stay where they don't feel free." He looked at her. The words didn't come quickly. "I feel freer with you than I've ever felt anywhere." She closed her eyes, and for the first time, tears welled beneath her white lashes. "I don't know how to love the way your kind does," she whispered. "No one ever taught me. Then we'll learn together." He pulled her into his arms, gently, and the two of them embraced. No armor, no titles, just two survivors who'd learned how to breathe among the ruins. In the days that followed, they rebuilt together. They discovered fragments of an old underground lab, remnants from Earth's first colonization. They merged Thoranii and human tech, built a new shelter, grew food, repaired long-range transmitters. But more importantly, they found purpose. It wasn't about empire or war. It was about giving voice to the forgotten, to those silenced by the crown, to humans and aliens who understood that love and freedom could be born, even from a blood-stained arena. One quiet night, Kalia sat beside him by the fire they'd built from living crystals. "If you'd met me when I was still air," she said, "you would have hated me. Maybe, but I would have hated you for the wrong reasons. Now I know the right ones, and I still choose to stay." She laughed, a rare sound, clear as crystal. "Then let's stay, and remake what's left." And there, beneath a strangely clear sky, the first true moment of peace was born, between two worlds that had always been taught to hate one another. The peace didn't last. 3 moons later, while Kalia was teaching Eli how to use a mental defense field, the Thoranii royal technique, the cave's atmosphere shifted. The crystals screamed. Literally, they had been found. Drones descended from the sky in spherical formation. Containment shields locked down the valley. And at the center, stepping down from a platform black as the void, came her. Lasthira, the new Shadow Empress, crowned by the Purity Caste. She was everything Kalia had refused to become: ruthless, cold, loyal to the Empire above all else. And she hadn't brought diplomats. She'd brought hunters, assassins raised from birth to eliminate royal blood who dared to abandon their roles. Eli pulled Kalia back in a makeshift fortress, but she already knew they couldn't run. "They don't want prisoners," she said, breathing hard. "They came to erase us from history. Then we become legend," he replied, raising his weapon. She smiled, even with tears in her eyes. "I've always hated endings that were too perfect." The battle was brutal. Kalia led with controlled fury, her living spear carved through the air in electric arcs, each strike breaking centuries of repression. Eli fought like a man who knew the value of every heartbeat. He guarded her back, deflected shots, lured enemies into improvised traps. But they were outnumbered, and when one of the hunters fired a projectile straight at Kalia's heart, Eli threw himself in front of it. The blast hurled him into a wall of crystal. The sound of bones cracking echoed like a sentence passed. "Eli!" Kalia screamed. She ran to him. Blood spilled from his mouth, His eyes were still open, but fading. Why would you do that? She whispered, kneeling beside him. He smiled, weak, but real. Because I chose you, to the very end. But the end didn't come. Kalia screamed, a sound that tore through the air, triggering the cave's crystals to explode in waves of blinding blue light. She didn't know she had that kind of power. No one did. The entire battlefield was disintegrated by a surge of emotional energy, a fusion of her bloodline and the pain of the bond she had formed. Lasthera and the hunters were blown back. Some died. Others were left blind. Eli was still breathing, but barely. She carried him to the crystal altar, an ancient device, only to be activated by Imperial heirs in moments of extreme crisis. It was forbidden to use on humans. Kalia broke every rule. I give you my blood, she said, activating the ritual. My legacy, my soul. Crystals pierced her blue skin. A stream of liquid energy flowed from her chest into his. Eli cried out, arching his body as the fusion of who they were became physical, psychic, and final. When he opened his eyes again, they briefly glowed violet, the royal color of Thorani power. What did you do? He whispered. She smiled, exhausted. Now we're an echo. You are part of my story. Literally. From the mountain's edge, the few survivors of the assault witnessed something that neither world could deny. A fallen queen saving her human love, with the last spark of her empire. They didn't know if it was the beginning of a new era or the end of everything, but they knew history would never be the same. The storm had passed. At the top of the crystal plateau, the sun rose for the first time since the attack. Its rays passed through floating shards of crystal, casting soft reflections over Eli's resting body. Kalia sat beside him, alone, in silence. She no longer wore ceremonial robes. There was no crown, no symbolic jewels, no insignia of the throne, just a simple white tunic, woven from energy fibers she had regenerated with her own hands. And for the first time, she felt free. Eli opened his eyes slowly. They were slightly tinted blue now, echoes of the ritual's fusion. It hurts less, he said, his voice raspy. That's because your soul is adapting to the new body, she replied. You're no longer just human. Should that scare me? She smiled, tired. A little. But you already survived me. There's not much left to fear. In the days that followed, they rebuilt. Not a throne, not a military base. A home. Using the remnants of the cave, they created the first free refuge, a hybrid space between human and alien culture, open to anyone seeking shelter from the cycle of war, revenge, and genetic purity. They came, one by one, deserters, scientists, exiles, entire families, human and alien, who had lost everything, and now saw in this unlikely pair the only truth that still made sense. One night, Kalia found Eli carving symbols into a wall. Old ones. Human ones. What is this? She asked. The names of my squad, he said, and of your handmaids. The ones who died for what we started. She stepped closer, touched the symbols, then took the chisel and began writing two Thorani words, forgotten names. And side by side, they created the wall of the fallen, not as martyrs, but as seeds of a new world. One morning, sitting by a field of cultivated energy crops, Eli turned to her. Do you miss the Empire? She took her time to answer. I miss believing I knew who I was, she said softly. But now, I know who I'm becoming, and that's worth the loss. He looked at her calmly, the way he always had. And who are you becoming? She turned her face toward the sun, someone with reasons to live, not just a rule. By the end of that stellar cycle, the first manifesto from the Free Refuge was sent to the colonies. We are the in-between children, neither pure nor submissive. We are the bonds formed where we were told only fear could exist. If you're also tired of fighting to fit in, come. There are no thrones here, only choices. Eli read the message aloud before sending it. Kalia, beside him, simply held his hand. Think they'll believe it, he asked. Some won't, but others will listen, because it's no longer about us. It's about what we refuse to destroy. And from the ruins of empire and pain, the first spark of something new was born. It wasn't peace. It wasn't glory. It was possibility. Night fell slowly over the Free Refuge. From the top of the central hill, Kalia watched the lights of the new village, small hybrid structures, some crafted from human metal, others grown from Steranii bioenergy. Children ran between them. Laughter filled the air, and no one asked what planet they came from. Behind her, Eli approached with 2 steaming cups of something strong and earthly. He sat beside her without a word. He knew there were too many thoughts inside her to force anything out. "Do you think about them sometimes?" he asked eventually. "The ones who betrayed you. The ones you lost." She brought the cup to her lips. Thought for a moment. "I do. But now, I don't hate them anymore." "Why not?" "Because I understand what they were trying to protect." "And what was that?" She looked at him gently. "The illusion. The idea that the world only makes sense if everyone stays in their place. If the different is isolated. If love has a flag, a language, a species." Eli looked toward the village. "It's easier to destroy the unknown than to sit still and listen to it breathe." Kalia smiled. "You listened to me, even before I knew what I wanted to say." Silence, but not uncomfortable. In front of them, a young hybrid girl. Human eyes, bluish skin, white hair streaked with brown, ran between the newly formed gardens. Daughter of 2 refugees, raised in freedom, part of something the Empire would never understand. Kalia watched her with quiet tenderness, then murmured, "They chain me like a monster." And still, Eli finished, "Someone dared to see your soul." She turned to face him. "Thank you for looking at me, even when all I knew was how to hurt." He touched her hand. "Thank you for staying, even when you could have let me die." They sat there for a long while, side by side. The moon began to rise on the horizon. Stars emerged, one by one, as if the universe itself was silently watching what they had built together. And in that moment, Kalia thought something she had never dared to say aloud, but now, for the first time, felt true. Maybe love isn't the end of war, but it's what makes it bearable. 5 years later, the galaxy had changed, not in grand parades or epic treaties, but on the edges of the map, in the places empires forgot, in the abandoned stations, on the flagless moons, in the ruins that once held war and now held life. At the center of this new political and cultural ecosystem, there was a simple coordinate. No military title, no imperial name. There, between crystal mountains and reborn forests, a small watchtower stood, with human panels, alien generators, and a gray flag that read simply, "Choose, breathe, stay." Inside, Kalia trained young hybrids, teaching them the gift of empathetic empathy, a variation of the ancestral Steranii minefield. Eli, in turn, led rescue missions. He picked up distress signals from damaged ships and fleeing civilians, guiding them patiently to the free refuge. They still argued sometimes, still disagreed about tactics, spice levels in food, and what to name the strange creatures from the forest. But between them, there was something no empire ever managed to break. Choice. On the main wall of the central hall, a new mural had been painted, not with weapons, not with crests, but with hand-drawn portraits. Kalia smiling beside a human child. Eli teaching an alien how to hold a plant. Everyday scenes. Quiet. Irreplaceable. A visitor once asked, "What were you two before all this?" Kalia answered without hesitation, "I was a weapon. He was a target." And Eli added, "Now we're a beacon. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story touched you. Maybe the unlikely love, maybe the hope of rebuilding, or maybe because you too have felt like someone who didn't fit in your own world." Here on this channel, we tell stories of those who dare to become more than what was expected, more than a role, more than a species, more than the fear. If you rooted for this couple until the end, like, share, and subscribe. There's so much more to come. And remember, even if they chain you like a monster, there's always someone out there who can see your soul.